Well, it looks like I'm going to get two videos out today after all, and I have to give a ton of credit to what David Braun did with this Northwestern Wildcat team last season after all the unprecedented controversy and everything else surrounding their former head coach Pat Fitzgerald. David Braun took this team to the postseason, but he has to deal with more unprecedented things happening surrounding this program in 2024. Can he still lead them back to the postseason? You're about to find out what I think here in this video. What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. I want to welcome you to my channel and welcome you either back or welcome to prediction season. I'm predicting all 134 teams in college football this summer, and it means I'm doing your favorite teams. So hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you know when that video gets uploaded. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video and all of my other videos as well. And you can support this channel in much more ways than simply by watching my videos, even though it does support my channel in more ways than you can even imagine. Liking, commenting, sharing, and anything else you do to interact with the channel helps support what I do here on YouTube, and I'm extremely grateful for anything that you guys are able to provide to me in support of this channel. With all that out of the way, let's talk about David Braun's Wildcats here in 2024. But before we do that, you got to know how I'm going to talk about it. We'll take a deep dive into the team's offense, take a deep dive into the defense, and at the end of the video, we will go through the Northwestern football schedule and give it a game-by-game preview and prediction. A couple more things before we do start. Right over here are going to be the stats the team put up either offensively or defensively last season. And of course, for your viewing pleasure, dear viewer, right below the team's logo, I have put the team's coaching staff. So I'll waste no more time. Let's talk about this Northwestern offense in 2024 that honestly is a little tricky to figure out. If they did not have some games where they absolutely exploded, look, they had 38 points against UTEP, 37 points against Minnesota in a 3-point win. They had 33 points against Maryland in a 6-point win, and 45 points against Illinois in a 2-point win in the regular season finale. This is an offense that we could be talking about not even scoring 20 points per game, not even getting, I'll say, 275 yards per game. But nonetheless, this was an offense that, yes, saw their inconsistencies, but when it needed to, was able to come through. It loses its two primary quarterbacks from last year because Ben Bryant has graduated and Brendan Sullivan has transferred over to Iowa. Ben Bryant from last season, 1,807 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, while Brendan Sullivan had 714 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Both of them right around the 62 to 63% completion mark. So who is going to be your quarterback for the Northwestern Wildcats in 2023? Well, I expect it to be Ryan Helinski, a former South Carolina transfer who only threw 4 passes last season, but you go back to 2022, had 1,644 yards, 6 touchdowns and 7 picks. While you want to see that touchdown interception number improve, you go all the way back to 2019. He had a 2,300-yard season. I believe that was with the South Carolina Gamecocks. So he still definitely has some really, really good upside and some pretty good mechanics here. He has everything he needs to be a good quarterback for this Northwestern program. You do return Jack Losh as well, who was in this quarterback room last season. Again, hopefully I'm saying that last name right. And Mike Wright is coming over through the transfer portal. He's a former Vanderbilt Commodore. Most recently, though, he transfers over from Mississippi State. Running back room, let's talk about what Ryan Helinski or Mike Wright, because I think either of those two guys will be the starting quarterback in 2024, have to deal with in the skill position room. Well, in the running back room, you have to lose Anthony Tyus. While Sullivan was the 3rd leading rusher last year, Tyus was the team's 2nd leading rusher, 238 yards, 1 touchdown, and 50 carries last season. That being said, though, your leading rusher and a really good player, and especially when he plays really, really well, and that is Cam Porter, 651 yards, 4 touchdowns on 166 carries last season. Now, I know he only averaged 3.9 yards per carry, but he's a guy that can average a whole lot more than that. He could get 5 yards per carry in 2024, and it wouldn't shock me at all. I think he's a really good player. He'll be a good back for Northwestern this upcoming season. You do get Joseph Hyman and Caleb Komolafe. Hopefully I'm saying those last names correctly. They are coming back to provide some depth in this running back room. Now, in the wide receiver room, you probably have your biggest loss on this offense, and that is your leading receiver from last year in Cam Johnson. Led the team in every major statistical category. That's catches, yards, and touchdowns with 54 catches, 715 yards, and 6 touchdowns last season, while Jacob Gill, Raymond Nero, and the tight end Charles Mangieri, however you say that last name. Again, I apologize for any mispronunciations. Gill is gone through the portal. Nero and the tight end, again, Mangieri, are all gone due to graduation. those guys were more depth pieces than anything. Gill sat back in this wide receiver room a little bit. Nero sat not as far back, but definitely more back in this wide receiver room as well, while Mangary was behind two other tight ends that had more yards and catches than he did last year. So when you talk about this wide receiver room in 2024, it has a lot of good talent. It'll be led by the two guys you see right across the way there in that first row of wide receivers. Bryce Kurtz and AJ Henning will lead this offensive attack, at least from a wide receiver perspective. Not Henning, I apologize. Kurtz was the guy that had 700 yards last year, 701 to be exact, with 5 touchdowns. But AJ Henning, the former Michigan transfer, 418 yards and 4 touchdowns for him. Those are going to be two really good pieces to this wide receiver room in 2024. Calvin Johnson II also comes back, while Frank Covey, again, however you say that last name, he returns to the wide receiver room as well. I mentioned 2 tight ends that were above the graduate Mangary last year. They were Marshall Lane and Thomas Gordon, sitting right around 11 catches for Lane, 13 catches for Gordon, and they were both right around that 112, 116 yard mark. In fact, those are the 2 numbers from both of those guys last season, and only 1 combined touchdown between the 2 that went to Gordon. So you do also get Lawson Albright and Duke Olgis back in the tight end room as well. And let's talk about the offensive line. This was a unit that struggled for Northwestern last year, and I'm putting that very lightly because they allowed 51 sacks last season. So overall, you take a look, 51 sacks, those offensive numbers, not a team that was really conducive to making a bowl game, yet it still happened. It has to get more consistent in 2024, and the offensive line has to get better, but it loses a lot of talented pieces through the transfer portal. Josh Prebe, Alexander Deuce, and Zachary Franks are gone through the portal, while Dom D'Antonio is gone due to graduation. So Josh Thompson, Caleb Tiernan, Jordan Knox, Nick Herzog, Ben Rather, and Braden Edwards all return to the offensive line room, while Cooper Lovelace, Matt Keeler, and Jack Bailey all come in through the transfer portal. Combination of those 9 guys, in my opinion, will be your starting offensive line. Again, the offensive line has to take a big step up. What are you going to get from quarterback play, whether it's Helinski, Wright, Losh, or anyone else that sits back here in this room? Maybe a young freshman that is coming in. Anything like that. Can you get Helinski throwing the ball like he could somewhat in 2022, but even all the way back in 2019? Mike Wright, what is he going to be able to provide to this offense if he is not the starting quarterback? Even if he does get to be the starting quarterback at times, which I honestly kind of expect from David Braun and this team, you have a ton of really good skill position players: Cam Porter, Bryce Kurtz, AJ Henning, Lane, and Gordon as your tight ends. If the offensive line can get better, they can get consistent quarterback play, the offense can actually be pretty solid here in 2024. I think they have a lot of nice pieces, and the defensive side here for this team doesn't lose much talent at all. I'm actually going to go through and talk about every player that the defense loses right now, because they only lose 5 notable guys from last season. On the defensive line, PJ Spencer is gone. He had 22 tackles for the team last season, didn't record a sack, and really nothing else in the stat sheet for him, but nonetheless, very talented player on this defensive line that Northwestern will miss, especially as far as depth goes. Bryce Gallagher has gone to the NFL, your leading tackler among every defensive player, and a very talented linebacker. In fact, you could argue one of the better linebackers in the nation over the past couple of seasons and during his time with this program. Had 120 tackles, 1 sack, 2 pass defended, 1 interception last year. That's a hell of a defensive player that you will now see play on Sundays. And you do lose a lot of pieces in the cornerback room to the transfer portal. Rod Hurd is going to be gone. I'll also tell you where all these guys have ended up. Rod Hurd has transferred over to Notre Dame. He, last season, very good defensive back for this team. 85 tackles, was 3rd on the team, 4 pass defended, and 1 pick. You're going to lose an exceptional player in Rod Hurd, again, going over to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, while these next 2 guys in Jaheim Joseph and Garnet Hollis are both going over to play for Neil Brown in Morgantown in the West Virginia Mountaineers. Joseph last season, he had 24 tackles, 1 pass defended, and was tied for the team lead with 3 interceptions. And you also do lose, again, as I said, Garnet Hollis. He was a top 5 tackler at 49 tackles and 3 passes defended last season. So you lose a lot of good talent off of this defensive side. In fact, all those guys had at least 20 tackles for the defense last season. So you do lose some pretty solid talent. But what do you have coming back here? Well, Richie Haggerty, Aiden Hubbard, who led the team in sacks last year with 6, Jalen Pate, Carmine Basto, Najee Story, Sean McLaughlin, Brendan Flakes, and Anto Sacco, who was second on the team with 5.5 sacks last year, even only after getting 13 tackles. And I could list a ton more names coming back to this defensive line room, as well as a ton of freshmen that come into this defensive line room. Patrick Schaller is an edge rusher. You have Callan Campbell, who is another 3-star prospect. But the guy I have on here as the highest rated recruit that Northwestern brought in this recruiting cycle is Troy Ragovich. So again, but much more than Ragovich, you could see Campbell or Schaller play some time on this defensive line as well. It's a really deep defensive line with a lot of returning talent that I expect to improve from a lot of their numbers last season. They allowed 157 rush yards per game, as you see there. 30 tackles, though, not 30 tackles, 30 sacks. That might sit right around where it was last year, if not get even better in 2024. There'll be some really talented pass rushers that can provide pressure to opposing quarterbacks next season. And one of those guys is coming from the linebacker spot in Xander Muller. Now, I know that last name can be pronounced a ton of ways. That's the way that I have heard Xander Muller's name especially pronounced. But he had 110 tackles, so also broke triple digits with his linebacker mate in Bryce Gallagher. Third on the team with 5 sacks, 2 pass defended, and also tied for that team lead with 3 interceptions last season. Kenny Soares and Mac Ulane is coming back. I do believe that is how you pronounce that last name, but I probably have it wrong, so you can correct me in the comment section below. Nigel Glover and Noah Taylor are also some players that come in through the transfer portal. Glover from Ohio State and Taylor, I believe, coming over from Cornell. You take a look at this defensive backroom. Theron Johnson, Ori Adie, hopefully I'm saying that last name right, and I definitely butchered it, so I apologize profusely. Braden Turner, they're all coming back to this cornerback room. You have Devin Turner, Coco Azema, Joe DeHaan, and Robert Fitzgerald all coming back to this safety room. A couple of those guys had picks last season. In fact, Turner had a pick last season. Azema had a pick last season. Theron Johnson had a pick last season. I guess I should say which Turner. Devin Turner had a pick last season. You got some really good talent in this defensive back room, and kickers are people too, so let's show them some love. You return your punter Hunter Renner from last year. Jack Olson is also coming back, and you get a punter/kicker duo here with Luke Akers coming back to this program as well. Really deep defensive line. I absolutely love Xander Muller as a linebacker. He could follow in Bryce Gallagher and be a potential NFL draft pick coming up this next April here in 2025. Some pretty good talent in the defensive back room, even though you do lose 3 corners that, again, were really, really special to this defense last season. That pass defensive number might very well stay around where it is, while the rush number can only improve here in 2024, I think, because of all the depth you have returning here to this team. So let's overall talk about the Northwestern football schedule in 2024. Any game at home is underlined, while any game on the road is in italics or that slanted text. Any game you see in green is going to be a game that I think the Wildcats are going to win fairly easily. Any game in yellow will be a close competitive game, but I still think the Wildcats are able to win. And anything in red, of course, is a loss. And I think Northwestern should get a fairly easy start to the season here against the Miami, Ohio Redhawks. Now, I recognize that the Redhawks have always been one of the better programs in the Mid-American Conference, at least as far as football goes. However, with all of that being said, I still don't think they match up to the talent of Northwestern, especially if this offensive line improves. The defensive line, especially, has a lot of guys that are going to provide havoc. Xander Muller is going to be a really good linebacker for this team at this seaseason. I really like a lot of the pieces on this Northwestern team, and I do have Miami, Ohio losing that game. Northwestern starts out 1-0. In fact, I think they start out 3-0 because you should be able to get a win against the Eastern Illinois Panthers, much like your in-state counterpart in the Illinois Fighting Illini are going to be able to get as well. But I also think you beat the Duke Blue Devils. Now, this is one of those cases where, yes, I think Duke is the more talented team, because even though you lose Riley Leonard, and even though you lose Jordan Waters, and even though you lose some really good offensive and defensive pieces that I just didn't mention there, you have Malik Murphy coming in. You have some really good talent coming in through the portal. And yes, Mike Elko was gone to coach Texas A&M. Manny Diaz is coming in there. I really like this Duke team, and I think even though a lot of those pieces leave, they're going to surprise quite a fair bit of people here in 2024. but I see them tripping up here. It'll take some time for Malik Murphy to get settled into the system. It'll take some time for Manny Diaz to get settled here. And I think this Northwestern team just quite simply continues the momentum they did from last year. They're going to feel extremely confident this season. And it wouldn't surprise me if Duke won this game, but that's not the way that I'm going to predict it. I have Northwestern winning this one. And again, I already said they're going to beat the Eastern Illinois Panthers. So a great start here to 2024 for the Northwestern Wildcats. I have them starting out 3-0. But I think that undefeated record is going to quickly come to an end when they have to go on the road in Seattle and play the Washington Huskies. And I know they lost everybody from last year. Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback, gone. Dylan Johnson, the running back, gone. You lose Roma Dunze, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk from that wide receiver room, gone. Tight ends, gone. Offensive linemen from one of, if not the best offensive lines in the country last season, gone. Defensive talent, gone. Head coach Kalen DeBoer, gone. That being said, some really talented pieces still coming back and coming into this team. Will Rogers, that quarterback. I still like a lot of the talent they have defensively. They were able to supplement pretty well through the transfer portal. And Jed Fish, he's a pretty good head coach himself. I think Washington will be fine in the Big Ten Conference this year. They'll be fairly competitive. I got them beating the Northwestern Wildcats right here. They hand the Wildcats their first loss of 2024. However, that being said, I think Northwestern goes back to their winning ways. They get an extra week of preparation and a home game to prepare for the Indiana Hoosiers. Now, I honestly should have said this before I really started to preview this schedule here, and it is why some of these predictions like Duke and Indiana, especially some of these home games, to be a little dangerous. Ryan Field is having construction on. They're going to do some advanced seating thing with it, so more of a lakefront stadium. Plus, they have a couple games in Wrigley Field this year, so really not a true huge home field advantage for Northwestern this year. Ryan Field, usually a place that could prove to be pretty difficult to play. It can get fairly noisy there. Overall, not one of the better home field advantages in the country, but alas, not playing in Ryan Field, I think it's going to affect this team a lot this year. I don't think it'll affect them much against the Indiana Hoosiers. I think Kurt Cignetti, he loses a lot of talent off that team last year, and while he decides to build the kind of program he wants to build, the kind of program he had at James Madison over here in Bloomington, I think it'll take some time, and the Wildcats will be able to beat the Hoosiers there in Week 6. But I got to tell you, it's all downhill from here. I think you lose to the Maryland Terrapins. That's a team I actually like in 2024. You bring, even though, again, you'll see I do not have them making a bowl game. If you go watch my Maryland prediction video, I'll kind of talk about why. The defense was as good as it's been under Mike Locksley last season. I've given them some really hard times for it. And while, yes, the defense was as good as it's ever been, I still have a lot of questions about that defensive side because you have to replace a ton of talent from last year. Tagovailoa at quarterback is gone. However, you do get MJ Morris coming in. There are a lot of talented pieces on that Maryland team. I think Northwestern can be competitive with them, but I'll go with the side that has home field advantage, as well as it being a Friday night. I think Maryland wins that game. And look, I got to tell you, this second half of the schedule is just brutal. It'd be really hard for Northwestern to win one, especially two games here to make the postseason, which they likely very well will have to do. Look, they could beat Maryland and lose to Duke. They could lose to Indiana and beat Washington, right? Like, it's just one of those things. Front half of the schedule, you have to do really well because the second half of the schedule is going to be brutal. And I got to tell you, right now, I got you losing every single game in the second half of the schedule. I love Luke Fickell in Wisconsin. I don't think people are talking about Tyler Van Dyke enough coming into this system. I think it's going to prove a lot of people wrong. He's going to come out play really well. We know the style of defense that Wisconsin likes to play, and Luke Fickell getting his feet wet in the Big Ten Conference last year, I think finally will settle in. I think Wisconsin's due for a big year, and that'll be a loss to the Wisconsin Badgers. You got to go on the road to play in Iowa City, and yes, we know, a lot of questions about Iowa's offense. What is the new offensive coordinator, Tim Lester, going to bring? That defense is going to be exceptional this year, and with inconsistencies on Northwestern's offense that I have questions about, especially on the offensive line, Iowa's going to be able to take advantage of that. That's a loss to the Iowa Hawkeyes. I also think you lose to the Purdue Boilermakers, and while Purdue may not have the best record at the end of the season, I like what Ryan Walters is doing, and I think he needs time to build this program back up. Purdue, overall, I think will be a better football team in 2022 or in 2024. I'm going backwards in time here. I think they'll be a better team here in 2024, and while the record may not show that, I think this game will start to show you some things. I think Purdue will beat Northwestern in Ross-Ade Stadium, and then flat out, you are not being You are not beating the Ohio State Buckeyes. I don't care that the game is in Wrigley Field. Ohio State's going to be one of the best teams in the country this year. The offense is loaded, and I know people are going to have questions about Will Howard and that offensive line, especially on the right side. But the offense is loaded. The defense is loaded. They're one of the favorites to go win the national championship this year. Northwestern is not beating the Buckeyes in 2024, nor are they beating the Michigan Wolverines, the team that just went and won a national championship. Yes, they lost a ton of talent, but they have a lot of talent coming back. And even though I don't love that quarterback room, the defense is going to be great. Donovan Edwards is going to be great. Michigan will be a good team this year, and Northwestern will lose that one. And I even have you losing to the Illinois Fighting Illini because I think Luke Altmaier is going to be better than he was in 2024. I think this is an Illini team overall that's going to take a step in the right direction after a disappointing 2023 campaign. Under Brett Bielema, the Illini will bounce back. They win this game, and I got Northwestern going 4-8 with one conference win. Now, could I see them doing better? Yes, especially after what David Braun did last year. In fact, I kind of want him to prove me wrong. I love stories like this. But if Northwestern can't get those inconsistencies figured out and the defense, especially on the defensive line and that run defense to improve, it's more so the offense for me. I like a lot of the pieces they have, but they got to get consistent. The offensive line has got to get better. Northwestern, I have it 4-8 in 2024. This is a long one, but I appreciate you sticking with me. Hey, I got 2 videos out today. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. And next up, we'll talk about the Boston College Golden Eagles. Goodbye.